If you think this war is winding down because the headlines say so, you are about to miss the most important move in this entire conflict. Israel's leadership believed they were entering the final phase. Western media was already writing the de-escalation narrative, and then Iran did something that did not involve a single missile, a single airstrike, or a single soldier, and it reset the entire strategic equation. If you want to understand what actually just happened and why it matters far more than another round of strikes would have, stay with me. And before we go further, if you want this kind of pattern-based analysis every week, hit subscribe and tap the like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel keep doing this work. Let's get into it. In this video, we are going to answer 3 questions. Why did everyone, including Israeli intelligence, believe this war was de-escalating? What move did Iran actually make? And why does it matter more than a military strike would? And what is the most likely next phase of this conflict? I'm going to walk you through the real strategic map here, not the headline version. Let's reset the context. Because the war is ending narrative did not come out of nowhere, it came from a real pattern after the most intense phase of direct confrontation between Israel and Iran. Both sides had genuine incentives to step back from the brink. Israel was managing the economic and military strain of a multi-front posture. Iran's leadership was managing internal pressure from a population exhausted by sanctions and conflict. Diplomatic channels through Oman, through Qatar, were quietly active. Western intelligence services were reading troop movements, rhetoric, and economic signals, and most of them pointed toward exhaustion on both sides. That is the structural basis for the de-escalation narrative. It was not media spin. It was a reasonable read of the available signals. But here is what the de-escalation narrative missed. It assumed that the only way Iran could change the strategic picture was through a kinetic move, a strike, a proxy attack, a naval incident. That assumption is exactly the blind spot Tehran has exploited for years. Iran's most consequential moves rarely look like military escalation in the moment. They look like quiet, structural repositioning, financial, technological, all diplomatic that does not trigger headlines on day one but changes the balance of power over the following months. That is the deeper pattern here, and it is the lens you need to understand what actually happened. Now let's run the actor breakdown, because 4 players are shaping this moment. Start with Israel publicly. Israeli leadership has signaled openness to a sustained calm, citing military objectives achieved and a desire to consolidate gains. Strategically, what Israel actually needs is time to rebuild munitions stockpiles depleted by sustained operations, time to manage an economy under real strain from extended mobilization, and time to repair diplomatic standing with allies who have grown uneasy with the scale and duration of the campaign. Israel's biggest constraint right now is that its military advantage is real but not infinite. Sustained high-tempo operations are expensive in ways that are not sustainable indefinitely without external resupply, primarily from the United States. Now look at Iran publicly. Tehran has used the language of strategic patience and resistance, the same framing it has used for decades. But what Iran actually needs strategically is to demonstrate to its own population and to regional allies that it has not been strategically defeated without provoking a response that reopens full-scale conflict. So that is an extremely narrow needle to thread. A visible kinetic response risks renewed Israeli and American military action that Iran's leadership wants to avoid, but total passivity risks looking weak to the domestic audience and to the broader network of allied groups across the region who look to Tehran for direction. Iran's constraint is that its conventional military options remain limited compared to Israel's, especially with degraded air defense capacity from the earlier phase of conflict. That constraint is exactly why a non-military move makes strategic sense. It lets Tehran project strength without inviting retaliation. The third actor is the United States. Washington's public position has been support for de-escalation alongside continued backing of Israeli security needs. Strategically, what the U.S. actually wants is to avoid being pulled into a prolonged direct confrontation with Iran while an election cycle and competing global priorities, China, Ukraine, domestic economic pressure, are already straining bandwidth. The American constraint is that any visible move by Iran forces Washington to react publicly, and overreacting risks escalation that the administration does not want, while underreacting risks looking weak to allies and adversaries alike. This is the position Iran's strategists understand extremely well, and it shapes what kind of move they are likely to make. The fourth actor is the network of regional powers, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, and the broader Sunni Arab bloc who are watching this entire sequence with their own calculations running. They want stability for economic reasons, but they also do not want to see Iran emerge from this conflict looking strategically diminished, because a weakened Iran changes the regional balance of power in ways that are not automatically favorable to them either. Their constraint is that they have limited ability to shape the outcome directly. They can apply diplomatic pressure and economic leverage, but the core decisions remain with Tehran, Jerusalem, and Washington. Now, the structural facts, the hard realities that actually constrain what can happen from here, regardless of what any single actor wants. Structural fact number 1. Iran's most effective strategic tools over the last several years have consistently been asymmetric and indirect. Proxy network coordination, financial and energy maneuvering, cyber operations, and diplomatic repositioning, rather than direct conventional confrontation where Iran is structurally outmatched. Any analysis that expects Iran's next move to be a missile strike is working from an outdated model of how Tehran actually operates. Structural fact number 2. Ceasefires and de-escalation periods in this region have historically been used by all sides not as endpoints, but as repositioning windows. Israel uses pauses to resupply and recalibrate. Iran uses pauses to rebuild proxy capacity and diversify its economic lifelines, particularly through China, as we covered in a previous breakdown. A quiet period is not evidence of resolution. It is evidence of regrouping. Structural fact number 3. The United States' political bandwidth for sustained Middle East engagement is genuinely limited right now, given competing strategic priorities elsewhere. This is publicly known, and Tehran's strategists read American attention spans as carefully as they read troop deployments. Any Iranian move that does not force an immediate, unavoidable American response is a move that exploits this exact constraint. Structural fact number 4. Information and financial maneuvering have become as strategically significant as battlefield positioning in this specific conflict. Iran has demonstrated repeatedly the ability to shift narratives, build alternative economic relationships, and reposition diplomatically in ways that shape the medium-term balance of power without firing a shot. That is the toolkit most likely in use right now, and it is the toolkit Western coverage consistently underweights because it does not produce dramatic footage. From here, 3 scenarios are possible. Scenario A is the escalation path. If Iran's repositioning, whatever specific form it takes, whether diplomatic, financial, or related to proxy coordination, is interpreted by Israeli intelligence as a direct threat preparation, rather than a strategic hedge, Israel may resume preemptive operations, restarting the cycle of conflict. This is the path where the ending war narrative collapses entirely and the region returns to active confrontation. Watch for the signal. Any reported Israeli strike justified explicitly as preempting a specific Iranian capability. Scenario B is the managed standoff, and based on the incentive structure we just walked through, this is the path most consistent with what both sides actually need right now. Iran continues quiet repositioning without crossing into visible military provocation. Israel continues consolidating without resuming offensive operations. Both sides publicly claim strategic success while privately buying time. This produces a prolonged period of tension without open conflict, uncomfortable, unresolved, but stable enough for both governments to manage domestically. Scenario C is the wildcard, and it involves a third party. A miscalculation by a non-state actor within Iran's proxy network, acting with more autonomy than Tehran intends, could trigger an incident that neither Iran nor Israel actually wanted, forcing both governments into a response cycle driven by events rather than strategy. This is historically how some of the most serious escalations in this region have actually started, not through deliberate, top-down decisions, but through decentralized actors moving faster than the principal powers intended. Now let's bring this home, because this affects you more directly than it might seem. Oil markets remain the most immediate channel. Any signal, even a rumor that this conflict is reigniting, moves crude prices within hours, and that flows directly into what you pay at the pump and what it costs to heat your home. Markets have been pricing in de-escalation. A reversal of that pricing, even a partial one, shows up fast. There is also a defense and aerospace market angle worth watching if you have any exposure there. Continued instability tends to sustain elevated demand for munitions and defense systems, which is a real, trackable financial signal tied directly to how this situation evolves. And there is the broader question of American attention and resources. Every dollar and every diplomatic hour spent managing a reignited Middle East crisis is $1 in an hour not spent on the strategic competition with China that we have covered extensively on this channel. These theaters are not separate. They compete for the same finite American bandwidth, and that trade-off has real consequences for how effectively Washington can manage multiple fronts simultaneously. So here's my read. Short term, over the next 30 to 60 days, expect continued ambiguity. No dramatic single event, but a steady stream of intelligence leaks, diplomatic signals, and economic moves that analysts will spend weeks trying to interpret. That ambiguity is not an accident, it is the strategy. Medium term, the variable to watch is whether Iran's repositioning includes any visible strengthening of its proxy network's operational capacity. That is the signal that would most likely shift this from managed standoff toward renewed escalation. Because it is the one development Israeli intelligence is least likely to tolerate quietly, long term, my call is this. This war is not ending, it is changing form. The conventional phase may be pausing, but the strategic competition, financial, diplomatic, and proxy-based continues underneath the surface. And that is where the real outcome of this conflict will actually be decided, not in any single headline-grabbing strike. Don't follow the headline. The headline says the war is ending. Follow the pattern. The pattern says this conflict has simply moved into a phase that does not produce dramatic footage, but still determines who comes out ahead. News cycles end, structures don't. That is what we study here. If this breakdown gave you a clearer read than what you have been seeing elsewhere, do me a favor, hit like, hit subscribe, and share this with someone trying to make sense of what is actually happening in the region. We will be back with the next analysis very soon.